Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Sarah Koenig. I'm the Conservation Director for Audubon Society of Western Pennsylvania. And I very much appreciate you all being here on this last morning. This is my second in-person conference this year, and I guess in 3 years. The last one was the Sustainable Agriculture Conference. It's a little different. I've just really enjoyed talking to all of you and appreciate you all having me here. So the Audubon Society of Western Pennsylvania, we are a 100-year-old chapter of the National Audubon Society. So we are, fiscally, operationally independent, but we do benefit from a lot of their really great climate change research, policy work. And we serve the 7 counties of southwestern Pennsylvania, including the city of Pittsburgh. And our mission is to connect connecting people to birds and nature since 1916 through our places, projects, and programs. So if you're ever in the Pittsburgh region, definitely come visit us. We have 4 public properties in Allegheny and Butler counties. Approximately 60,000 people visit those sites each year. So there's anywhere from casual visitors, folks for programs, field trips. It's really lovely to work at a nature reserve, but also not be in charge of the kids. I realized we actually own, manage, and or protect about 800 acres. So I'm 200 short on this. And we have a native plant nursery at our headquarters property where we propagate about 20,000 native plants, mostly from hand-collected seed each year. So we have 18 full-time staff, probably grows to about 30 during the busy season. And programs, we have 4 full-time educators that delivered almost 800 programs last year, directly reaching 20,000 plus people. So they are a really small but mighty amazing team. And our places and programs are really what we've mostly been known for. But 5 years ago, they hired me as the first conservation director, and we've really had the opportunity to grow our conservation work since then. A lot of this was first formalizing the work that they've done and had built over the many years, but then really over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to grow a lot of our projects. So I don't have time to go into the projects, but I do want to point out that some of these we entirely do in-house, like our Certified Backyard Habitat program, where we visited. Every year, I just don't have enough people to get to all the households that want to enroll. So we actually visit hundreds of households each year and help them figure out how to create habitat in their backyard. So we do that entirely in-house, but then other projects like the rights of way, there's an S there for pollinators, and then the Buffalo Creek work, that has been largely built on partnerships. We couldn't do a lot of this work without collaborative partnerships. So long before I was at Audubon, the organization really saw the opportunity to work, the potential habitat impact on rights of way. They're a necessary part of our lives, current society, but such tremendous opportunity to really make a significant impact for pollinators and birds on at this land use. So with funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, from the 2020 fund, we actually really got started on this work. So our 2-year project scope is to restore 95 acres of habitat, enhance 56. We're also working with Chatham University to apply the Rights of Way Habitat Working Group's pollinator scorecard. We have multi-sector partnerships. There are 2 other nonprofit agencies involved. We have the Friends of the Riverfront and the Rachel Carson Trail Conservancy. So we're looking at not just utility rights of ways here, but we're looking at roadside and trails. Our university partner, as I mentioned, is Chatham University. We're also working with PennDOT to do 50 acres of roadside, turf to meadow conversion. Our local government partner is the Allegheny County Parks. They had identified rights of way as priority habitat improvement opportunities throughout their parks. So they were a great partner. They also have a lot of experience with turf to meadow conversion outside of rights of way. Since the funding was awarded, utility companies have joined us. And I've said this both internally and externally that I really wish I would have called the utility companies before I wrote the grant. You can see here, we've got a ton of different partners. Friends of the Riverfront brought 1 acre. Allegheny County brought 10 acres. I think Rachel Carson brought 15. PennDOT 50, but we really needed, NIFWF is only going to look at your grant if you have a lot of acreage. And utility companies have a lot of acreage, and they've surprised me in such a positive way by willing to work with us. So after the funding was awarded, we also brought on several utility companies, and a final partner, a federal agency, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Pittsburgh District has also been a partner. So as I mentioned, the initial funding was provided by NIFWF, and since then we've received financial support from NiSource Columbia Gas and Duquesne Light Company. So for this particular grant, we're focusing on monarchs, rusty patch bumblebees, and yellow banded bumblebees. But talking to Lou last night reminded me that the importance of taking a holistic approach. So we're not just going in and planting milkweed entirely and just forgetting the rest of it. We're really thinking through the entire season, not just quality foraging habitat, but also overwintering opportunities, nesting opportunities. So some of the things we're doing is we are propagating and planting 4,400 milkweed at our native plant nursery. I also got a second grant to focus on agricultural land, which my native plant nursery manager was not that excited about because she has to propagate 11,000 milkweed, not just 4,400. We also worked with Ernst Conservation Seed to develop a special seed mix specifically for bumblebees and Western PA bumblebees and monarchs. They're so incredibly helpful. They help so many different people. I absolutely recommend Ernst if you ever have a special question or a special seed mix you need. Also, where conditions allow, we're planting early flowering trees and shrubs like New Jersey tea, lowbush blueberry, redbud, service berries to provide those early season floral resources for bumblebees when those resources are pretty scarce. Clump forming grasses for bumblebees. Mark Filey in early COVID days was the first person to tell me that there were superfoods and immunity boosting plants for bumblebees. And that just blew my mind. Like wild bergamot does both of these things. So it was just, cannot speak highly enough of Ernst, and we've absolutely made sure to incorporate those species in our seed mix. And of course, we're doing targeted invasive species management. And as I mentioned, we're also working with folks to adjust their mowing height. They can go up to maybe 6 or 8 inches instead of really close to the ground. That still provides opportunities for bumblebee nesting. And I'm really excited that this has continued to come up throughout the entire summit. And I only have 10 minutes, so I won't go too far into this. But of course, the work that we're talking about, that we've spent the last 3 days talking about here, this is incredibly important. These are indicator species. I won't, just incredible declines. Every time I write a grant and I have to pull together the stats to kind of make my case, it's really shocking at how, the significant declines we've seen of monarchs and bumblebees and our native pollinator species. However, like the collective group here, all the work that you're doing, the work that we can do together, really has some serious, really significant changes. We talked yesterday about that mass extinction and maybe, how can we level that out and even improve it? So according to Xerces, some of the challenges our native pollinators and birds face are pest and disease, habitat destruction, invasive species, climate change. Like in Pittsburgh right now, we are getting a lot of false springs. So these are native pollinators and native plants have co-evolved over thousands of years. And now all of a sudden it's getting warmer earlier. Our plant, some of our trees are leafing out earlier. It's just this really delicate balance that has evolved over thousands of years. The timing is not ideal anymore. Is that cardinal flower still in bloom when the hummingbirds are here nesting, or is it done blooming because it was super warm in February? And last, I want to mention pesticides with an asterisk, because there's also widespread documentation of the impacts of neonics, for example, on our pollinators. But but we absolutely recognize herbicides as an important tool in the toolbox of habitat management. I personally came around on this a few years ago. It's easy for me to do organic gardening in my tiny little backyard. But when I'm looking at landscape level habitat management, or even the 800 acres I'm in charge of on our own nature reserves, we absolutely recognize the importance of herbicide as a toolbox, using best practices. And again, rights of ways are just incredible opportunities. I've heard the number 1 million miles since I was here in the US. I'm not sure if that's entirely how accurate that is, but I mean, this is like a serious opportunity to make a big difference. Won't go into this, but again, these numbers are just shocking. Every time I pull them up, they really scare me, but then at the same time, a real opportunity for us to collectively make an impact. So just a couple highlights of the projects that we're working on specifically collaboratively. So as I mentioned with PennDOT, we're looking at 50 acres of roadside habitat. They have a number of pilot projects they've done with Pheasants Forever, for example, and they have a statewide pollinator habitat plan. But then really getting into implementation of the tools that they need, and the scaling up is what we're trying to help them do. So from the beginning, we've taken a collaborative approach. Audubon is the project manager, but even in terms of site selection, we've made sure to engage the local district staff to help us identify the best sites, understand their challenges, understand the opportunities, what training do they need, what equipment do they need, get their buy-in from the front, so hopefully they can help us with long-term sustainability and success of these sites. Also early on, we explored opportunity for overlap with Columbia Gas rights of way. They were really interested in, it was actually the Rachel Carson Trail Conservancy that introduced us to Columbia Gas and Grow with Trees and said, they might be willing to work with you. They've been really helpful. So initially in the PennDOT project, we looked at, okay, is there an opportunity to specifically work where Columbia Gas and PennDOT rights of way overlap to really just bring as many partners and as much lesson learned, knowledge, skills, resources to the table. That did not work out initially, but Columbia Gas has stayed at the table, which is incredible. So the site prep was done by PennDOT staff. Audubon put together a site schedule of herbicide, a timetable when they should apply it for the various sites. Planting, okay, so I want to mention that a few of these, we got the grant. I was like, okay, we have like 10 partners. There are all these different types of sites. Now I really need to figure out how to make this happen. So I began to call other DOTs across the country with successful programs, Texas, Ohio, these well-known, very well-established programs, digging into the right-of-way habitat working groups, resources, like, okay, we need to do this right. We're doing this at a big scale. So the big takeaways from these various successful DOT programs were that site prep was critical. Get rid of any of those existing plants, the unwanted plants, and make sure you do it well because your project's going to potentially fail if not. The second one was really the planting. A lot of these conservation, these seed mixes, whenever the seed mixes, a lot of like the Monarda and the Black-eyed Susans, as Mark mentioned on our first field trip, they're these tiny little seeds. And we have like 25 different species in our seed mix. So if these are not planted at the correct depth, you're just not going to get germination. I think it's about an 1/8 inch. So this was the second big takeaway. Hire someone that knows what they're doing for the planting part. And then the maintenance, and then the long term, the mowing and then the spot spraying, that was the third big takeaway. You can do all these preparation, the planting right, but if you don't take care of it, you're going to lose it. So this is where NiSource and Columbia Gas has really come in to help us because we're not working on their rights of way because that approach didn't work out. But in conversations with them, we said, PennDOT committed to this during the grant proposal phase, but now in the implementation phase, they're concerned that they don't have the training, the resources, the experience to actually make sure that this is successful. So NiSource and Columbia Gas have stepped up and said, okay, well, we can help with maintenance for the next couple of years. We can help with training of, it will be beneficial for Columbia Gas staff to be trained on this, but you can go ahead and invite a couple of PennDOT staff to also join us. So this is, they've just, this is not an example of where partnering with the utility companies, is really going to help make this project successful long term. The grant's done at the end of the year, but I still want it to succeed. I'll meet my grant deliverables, but I don't want it to just fall apart when we're done. Okay, so last slide here. Another example is these 10 acres in the Allegheny County parks. Allegheny County parks that identified these rights of way as priority habitat opportunities, but we really need to engage the companies to make sure, the folks that are actually out there managing them, to make sure that what we're doing is compatible, but also at the same time isn't going to just go away in a year because they have some major changes planned. So First Energy has been incredibly helpful. They have, I've been impressed with their knowledge. I had no idea the amount of IVM that they were already doing. So they've been really helpful with site prep, setting up volunteer days for us. And then just with a collaborative approach, the funding we received, the lessons learned, the connections, and then Allegheny County is installing and maintaining these. But I want to mention the community benefit, like that came up this morning. So these are high visibility sites that have the opportunity to both improve habitat and make a difference for people as well and serve as an education opportunity. So we're excited to just continue to do this work, continue to work with our existing partners. A lot of other folks have reached out to us and environmental advisory councils, municipalities, parks groups, and said, hey, we've heard you're doing this great work. We want to work with you and these utility companies to continue to make this happen. Also shout out to the funders and a ton of partners. I realized I missed RES and Grow with Trees on my partner list. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm back. So Caroline Hernandez, and I'm with the Rights of Ways Habitat Working Group, which is hosted and facilitated by the University of Illinois, Chicago. And the working group we started it was grassroots. My boss, Iris Caldwell, was having discussions with a couple of energy companies and departments of transportation. She was talking to land managers, and they're saying, we want to manage in a way that's pollinator friendly. We don't have the resources and we don't have the support. And so we need some way to collaborate to do that. And so back in 2015, we hosted our first Rights of Way as Habitat working group meeting, and it was a huge success. We got some case studies, we got some people talking about their best management practices, what was working well for them, where their challenges were, and then we started figuring out ways to collaborate in the future. So fast forward, we have grown significantly. We are now make up more than 400 organizations across the United States and Canada, which consists of over 1,700 individuals. And it's not just energy and transportation organizations, though the focus is on supporting these organizations in the creation and conservation of habitat on their lands. But we also have nonprofits that are interested in this initiative as well, conservation groups, environmental groups. We have technical experts, we've got consultants, and we work closely with other universities. And then we also have buy-in from government agencies. We have Fish and Wildlife Service attending our meetings on a regular basis. We have buy-in from local agencies. And so through this, we're able to serve this higher need of resources and actions that support this conservation work. We have a number of initiatives, and I could talk all day about them. So I'm just going to go for like the really big splashy ones. And I would encourage you to reach out to me and go to our website to learn more about it and to learn about our smaller things as well. So the one that you've heard a couple of times about over the past day and a half is the Monarch Candidate Conservation Agreement with Assurances. This is a voluntary pre-listing tool. So the monarch butterfly is being considered as a threatened or endangered species. And we have helped create helped facilitate the first nationwide CCAA for energy and transportation organizations to commit to conserving habitat on their lands. And in return, they get regulatory assurances that no matter what happens to the monarch butterfly, they won't be asked for additional conservation measures. And if there's any kind of litigation of, okay, it's not listed, yes, it is listed, they keep their status quo of this conservation, and then they have those assurances. It gives them that operational flexibility that no matter what happens, they continue doing what they're doing. And it provides this immediate and long-term benefit for monarchs, but really broadly for pollinator species and ecosystems by having these organizations creating habitat on their lands and then maintaining it. And the aim of this CCAA is to create more than 2 million acres of habitat on energy and transportation lands. And we finalized it in early 2020. And since then, we have received 35 applications from across the country, 20 of which have been energy companies. Some of them are actually in this room, so I would encourage you to find your closest energy company. And actually, if any of you want to raise your hand if you're feeling bold from having applied or planning on applying, they're here. 15 departments of transportation or highway agencies. And then through these enrollments, they have committed to creating and conserving more than 815,000 acres across the United States just for the monarch butterfly. So that was created through the working group. We had some working sessions. We heard that this was a need, and then we got more than 40 partners working directly with Fish and Wildlife Service to create this agreement and then to enroll in the agreement. We also have the Geospatial Habitat Database, and this is specifically for energy and transportation lands or managers. So Lou was showing us those the maps of tracking habitat on your system. And so through this database, you can track the management areas, and then you can also take those pollinator habitat scorecards and put that into the database. And this acts as a central repository for all energy and transportation organizations that are interested to track that habitat. And it facilitates these these conservation collaborations. We now have organizations that are using this to plan out their next habitat activities and say, okay, I see that you're gonna do habitat over here, we're gonna do habitat nearby, so then we can create these stepping stones. It helps communicate conservation value to stakeholders and the public. We have a private facing page where you can see exactly where this habitat is if you're using this database. And we have a public facing page for security purposes. And that aggregates and anonymizes the data to county level. But you can see in this county, there's this many pollinator scorecard points and this kind of habitat, and it's supporting this many monarchs. And we also use this data to help inform future listing decisions. So we share this data with the Monarch Conservation Database, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service looks as that as one of its data points to figuring out how much land is available for monarchs, and can be used for future listing decisions as well. Don't need to go into this. We've heard a lot about it, but we also have the pollinator habitat scorecard. One thing that Dan noted that I thought was important was this is an iterative process, and we are here to serve energy and transportation organizations to the best of our ability. So we are working to continuously improve the scorecard. We hear from scientists that there are points that can be improved, and we're working on doing that. And so, throughout all of these activities, if you have, input, if you have comments, we want to hear them, because we want this to be the best possible tool to create and conserve habitat on your lands. We are in our second year of a cost benefit study. So we've got that net present value calculator, which is immensely important. But we're also trying to dig into it a little bit more by looking at what each vegetation management activity costs when you're doing conventional vegetation management versus pollinator friendly vegetation management. And so it's a slow process, because there's just so much information and so much data. We need to make sure that we're doing it right. But the first year of this feasibility study, we just looked at who had data, were they able to share it with us, and were we able to aggregate it. Now we're just focusing on routine vegetation management, and we're slowly starting to collect that data, and we're going to analyze it to see what kind of trends we can find. And then, it's still a feasibility study. This is an immense task to make sure that we're doing something right, and it's not just a huge waste of time. And so we're focusing on this, and then we're going to say, is this cost benefit calculator still feasible, and how do we keep creating this and making it useful? We have the phase project, so we try and do some acronyms as well, but it's pollinator habitat aligned with solar energy. We got a grant from the Department of Energy to study the effects of co-locating pollinator habitat on large scale solar facilities, and that's over 10 megawatts. And we're looking at 3 factors. We're looking at the ecological factors, so what kind of biodiversity is out there. We're looking at the plants, the bees, and the birds. We're looking at the economic factors. Of course, there's going to be a little bit more cost when you're creating habitat to start with, but does that mean less management in the future? Does that mean less mowing, less herbicides? If you've got that sustained management or sustained habitat, then is that going to cost less in the future? And then the performance impacts. Anecdotally, we've heard, and there's not a lot of science out there right now, but if you have habitat under your solar panels, it creates a cooling effect, which increases the performance of these panels. And so we're looking at the performance of these panels and seeing how that has an impact. And then we're creating some tools and guidelines with that, an implementation guidance. Is this the right way to go with your solar site? And then how to do that. So those are just our big projects, and would encourage you to visit our website. If you have tools and resources, we're hoping to have a working group meeting in the near future. Please reach out to us, and we'd love to hear about them. Thank you.
All right, so I'm Mike Retterer. I'm with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. I'm the National Right to Wind Energy Coordinator. This process has been a little bit of a track. It's kind of followed the same course, I guess, as the Pollinators Habitat Working Group. Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, just give you a little bit of background on us, because some might be saying, we don't have any pheasants on it right away, or we don't have any quail, but we are known as the Habitat Organization. And being a Buckeye, it was really hard for me to not to say the Habitat Organization, just so we know. But being a habitat organization, it really is about the habitat, the vegetation, the structure, and all the benefits that go along with that. As been mentioned before, whether it's pollinators or whatever the bird of choice or the animal of choice is, a lot of these are co-inhabited, or we have indicator species where we get a lot of benefits from those. But Pheasants Forever is a national organization. As you can see, we have a footprint pretty much across the country. Right-of-ways, as we know, impacts everybody pretty much every day of their life, across the country. So it is a good fit for where we're at. We currently have, it changes daily, but we currently have over 215 biologists on the ground, which outside the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we are the largest employer of wildlife biologists of any organization. We got a lot of chapters and volunteers and stakeholders that are out there across of it. We do mainly it's habitat work. Almost all of those positions, or I should say all of those positions, are either partnership or grant funded. So when we talk about partnerships, these are usually bringing multiple organizations together for a benefit in what they're doing. A lot of farm bill biologists that work through USDA offices, but then also do a lot of private land work, but also a lot of those commingle in with right-of-way stuff. So when we get into this and right-of-ways and why is Pheasants Forever kind of involved in this, there's between 35 and 37 million acres occupied by right-of-ways across this country. Put that in perspective, that is a larger number than we have ever had under the CRP Farm Bill program, or equal to. There is a huge amount of acreage. We all know it's not all going to be quality habitat, but it's potential, right? What is out there and where it is. The other thing about right-of-ways that has been mentioned multiple times is these are usually linear connective tracts of vegetation. We have what's going on with urban sprawl, increased farming activities, whatever the options are, is this country's been, the habitat's been basically segregated, right? It's been moved around. So we have a lot of areas where we may have good populations, but they can't go anywhere. There is no ingress or egress, right? So we have issues. So these can be those spokes of the wheel, so to speak, that reconnect those. These are migration for birds, insects that we have out there, and then even a lot of our upland game birds and things like that that need to move. These could be those connective habitats. Let's talk about solar. So how could we be involved in solar? So a lot of what Pheasants Forever does, what we do is we help design seed mixes, the quality habitat that's going to be out there, what needs to be in place based off of whatever the outcomes or desires of the persons are. So working with developers or the end users, the company that's going to be having the energy at the end, because they're going to be the ones left with the maintenance and operations to understand, racking heights, the seed mixes, building those that can use the IBM, certain herbicides. We have resistant species out there or tolerant species out there, so we can include those based off of the chemistry or the management strategies that's going to be implemented. So that works out there. Solar is the fastest growing green energy out there. It is crazy. It is the wild, wild west, and it is exciting and scary all at the same time, pretty much every day. But in total, we're really talking about these deeply rooted perennial vegetation, perennial plant species that we can utilize on this to provide the wildlife and environmental benefits that are out there, but can then be managed usually at a cost neutral or a cost benefit scenario. Railroads is another one out there. People don't think about railroads much. We have a lot of remnant prairies along railroads because they've been there a long time. So when we think about that, we're not talking about that first 24 feet, 12 feet on each side that they kind of keep as a clear zone, but they do have some areas outside that would be considered like back slope on transportation areas that could be managed at a different time. Simply, they like to use IVM or herbicide use, that's fine, but timing, right? What we do can be as important, or when we do it can be as important as what we do. So looking at those areas out there and what that can be. And then the other part of this, a lot of these railroads are being, I guess, revitalized once they go out of service into like rails and trails and things like that, which provides another opportunity to put habitat out there. And it's an education opportunity, right? Because those are bikers, joggers, family folks, people that may not have a connectivity to what we're doing. And that's the place we can introduce it and understand and tell the story of what's going on. Electric utilities, hey, we're in the room, right? We understand this. It's managing these things in a different way that's been done before, or looking at those. We have those multiple zones. We can manage them slightly differently. Yes, vegetation, incompatible use has been very important, but can we bring in the environmental and the wildlife component to those and get even more benefits? Transportation, roadsides, we've got multiple ones.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Siri. Multiple ones out there. And again, it's managing these in different zones. We understand that there are clear zones and things have to be managed in a certain way for safety, not impacting those, and whether it's medians or back slopes and whichever way the organization works within that state and what they want to do. We've already heard it before. It works everywhere, right? We can do things in different places. So let's figure out what works and make it and work on it the best we can. Pipelines, as like our partnership with API on the guidance documents and getting started with these. It's been heard before, pipeline is probably the furthest behind of all the other ones, but they're definitely at the table looking at this. What can we do? Taking most of what's been currently just mowing and moving them into those different phases of vegetation management and what that looks like. And finding, again, instead of managing the right of way in one way, we have multiple zones that could be managed in a different way. We know that it doesn't fit everywhere, but there are definitely opportunities out there where we can do these different management strategies and get the benefits. Again, sorry in the back, small text, but essentially most people have probably seen this before. Is again, it just all goes back to trying to identify and utilize and encourage as much of the deeply rooted perennial vegetation as we can for this, for all the different metrics that are out there, whatever's being, I guess, whatever's important at that, not that point in time, but whatever metrics that they're trying to capture, whether it's through ESG, public engagement, social investment, identifying those root systems of where they are, right? We have fibrous, we have taproot. So even in designing mixes, if their focus is on carbon capture, having as many species out there that have that fibrous root system as we can to capture as much carbon as possible. Not that we won't have the other ones that are there, but just using those plants to identify the benefits of it, right? Telling that story to the community, things like this works out really well. So this spring, well, I guess we should go back 2015, we attended the Rights of Way as Habitat Working Group. A lot of our biologists were working with local companies on small scale projects here and there, things like that. Over the course of the years, we've heard more and more from you guys as the utilities and the energy companies at these meetings, what is needed, what is out there, what you're looking for. Other partners through those projects, we figured out or kind of understood what they were asking for. In 2017, we got more and more involved. We had some biologists specifically working in right-of-way areas with different organizations and groups. And then from that, what we heard back was the additional education and training of contractors and also staff, right? There was also other information. How do we get this done? We want to do it, but how do we do it, right? What about the assessment? Who's going to do it? Who's going to do this? So training and things like that were important. So we created my position in 2020, essentially, started working on it. 2021, it became official. And then this spring, we rolled out the Rights of Way Energy Habitat Program to help work with companies like that's in the room to engage, to find out, to figure out what are those hurdles, what are those things, what do we need to do, where are the opportunities and where are they not to engage, and then also help facilitate them moving forward, because we know and understood that they wanted to do it. How did they do it? And then also provide those additional resources. So what we know is through these habitat programs, it is essentially, you know, a lot of them were started up as mowing or in different stages of this, right? But it's constantly moving that pendulum to the far right, to get towards that integrated habitat management where we're doing a lot more. So it's not just mowing, it's not just IVM. Once we get to a point, can we interseed specific species that we may be missing or for additional benefits, things like that. So it was really where do you fall on that pendulum and how far do you want to go? We found that once we get them involved, the excitement is there. And then a lot of times it's, okay, what can I do next? What can I do next? What can I do next? So this just kind of talks about the difference. Essentially, we all know about IVM and what it is. We just picked out a few other indices that really fits within Pheasants Forever and also the environmental part of it to focus on. The timing of the spring, right? To be outside the nesting seasons, outside the minimal impacts, outside of migration periods. We don't want to remove those floral and nectar resources, you know, during a time, you know, if they're going to need it through those migrations, can we do something at a different point in time to benefit that? The different mixes we could use so that they could be used to make sure we have those benefits. And then really, that promotion of that early successional habitat communities, because essentially we know we're fighting and managing what's on the right of way, but also what's on the adjacent land cover on both sides, right? That's what we're really fighting coming in. So why should we be considered, or why be interested in the Rights of Way and Energy program? Essentially, it's all those benefits, right? Water quality, different carbon metrics. There's multiple ones out there. It depends on what they want to do. There's going to be a figure out a way, I'm sure, to actually capture those and monitor, put a monetary value on them. The soil health, those increased ecological service, the enhanced wildlife benefits that are out there. We've talked about this before. I know that Robin did. The community engagement, that social investment piece, telling the story is important, right? Getting back to that and with those folks, and then also the cost benefits.